dedicated to the people of the world and all its inhabitants. We've got to learn to live together with some understanding and care for each other. Let's go the extra mile and do it with a smile.
American museums, as a result of some of these movements in popular culture and what was happening with popular culture generally, I think was heading that direction anyway. Museums were. They were becoming more open places. And when I, as in the course of my career, actually became chair of the board of the American Association of Museums, now the American Alliance of Museums, it was in the process of sort of overseeing the transformation of how museums saw themselves in sort of the late part of the 20th century, going into the 21st centuries, of being much more open and bilateral, if you will, in their relationships to the communities in which they sat than they had been previously. No longer the temple on the hill run by its very internally driven priesthoods, but very much institutions that sat in the community and where the windows and doors were open in ways that they hadn't been before.
Sort of in a nosedive into sort of a recreation of that, aren't we? With this, the latest moves from the current administration.
Yeah, I think they're highly problematical. That's the most pleasant way I can
Generous, right?
say it, the most generous way I can state it. I think it's really rather alarming. And we can, for me, in those days, the National Museum of the American Indian and what we were trying to do was closely aligned to what I understood the Smithsonian Institution to be. The Smithsonian Institution is fundamentally our national museum system in this country. They're very much about sort of charting the history and the course of this country and culture and art and science through time. And it has to be done in a way that is inherently inclusive. If I may take the very specific context in which I use that word, in sort of expanded institutionally into a place like the Smithsonian, that's what we're about. It is that kind of open-ended research, accessibility, mutual accessibility between our history and this institution. And I felt that that is what the National Museum of the American Indian was bringing to the mix. And what institutions like the National Museum of African American History and Culture does the very same thing. And that's what I mean when I say they are really institutions of American history and not just the history of these particular ethnic communities in the United States. They're all part of the cultural tapestry that we call the United States. And we do our best when we are embracing the totality of that history, which contains much to celebrate, but which also contains our challenges as a country in going through history ourselves, which has not been without its very considerable hiccups. And that includes communities like the African American community and the Native American communities. And when I hear a statement that runs along the lines of, it's a little bit woke if we concentrate too much on the matter of slavery, I don't like that, candidly, because I think that is a departure from the very fundamentals of what the Smithsonian Institution should be doing. It should embrace it all and kind of walk us through all of our history, both the bumps as well as those things we celebrate.
Right. I mean, woke says nothing um, in a pretense of saying everything.
I agree. I agree. And there's nothing woke about the word inclusive. If you pick that pick that word apart in terms of our own history, um, this this country, in terms of its aspirations from the very beginning, was wrapped up in everything from the Declaration of Independence to the Constitution, etc., is very much the contrary of that. It is a journey which is inherently inclusive by definition and by experience. And this instead is sort of a particular turn that is more political in nature rather than focused on laying out the history of the American experience in history.
So the politics of that becomes sort of the politics of, we will tell you what the truth is, instead of taking a page out of Jonathan Rauch's book, The Constitution of Knowledge, and saying that truth comes from a long and extensive dialogue in which we are open to one another and explore those things.
That's correct. That's correct. And I think that that's what I meant also when I said that I would hope museums can become something more than simply a stop on the tour bus route to look at pretty things. They are gathering spaces, civic and social places where those kinds of conversations can occur. Museums cannot do everything in that regard, but they can contribute to that kind of process, especially when we see other institutions that we have relied upon in the past to carry on those kinds of conversations. Congress? I don't think so, at least not right now. They don't do that anymore. Churches, even organized religion, was a gathering space for that kind of conversation in lots of ways, and is less so now. So we need to find those spaces wherever we can. And I want museums to be those kinds of spaces where all matters relevant to the aims of the museum can be discussed in a civil sort of way, if you will, but truthfully, and not with intentionalities that are contrary sometimes to exploring the full truth of matters.
So how do you push back against this, Rick?
You don't do it. That's why I'm talking to you. I think that we've come to the point where it really has to be resisted. And I have watched, you can really, what's happening at the Smithsonian is emblematic of what is going on far more broadly. And I think each of us who feels the way that I do, has to pick those points where you feel you can intervene and where you can resist it and do so. And I honestly think that what's happening at the Smithsonian is simply emblematic and symbolic of what is going on in lots of other places. I live in Los Angeles. I sat here and watched this road show with hundreds of Marines and thousands of National Guards people who were supposedly brought to restore order to the city, and ended up standing around a federal building that is in some far quarter of 2 blocks and 3 blocks of the city, the total city of 4 million people. I mean, they were, nobody could figure out why they were here. That kind of thing is just part of the same picture. And my piece of it can be focusing on this question. With the Smithsonian, the Smithsonian still ranks as one of the most trusted institutions in the country. I'm not sure that's going to persist if we go much farther down the road that we seem to be going down at the moment with respect to the Smithsonian.
Well, how the Smithsonian responds to this moment is going to dictate that to a large extent, isn't it? I mean, we've been through this with some of the larger universities,
Yeah.
and I think that has, you know, the president has declared victory where that's concerned, but I think I'm more worried about the long-term consequences of the disappointment that has been shared with the world about our institutions of higher learning and the importance of them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, I agree with that, and I think that that's you know, that's true with the Smithsonian, and my feeling is that, having followed it fairly closely, and I know something. I obviously have contacts with people at the Smithsonian. The secretary of the Smithsonian is a longstanding personal and professional friend of mine. He's the former founding director of the African American Museum, just as I was the founding director of the NMAI. He actually sat on the board of the NMAI at a point in the history of our institution. But I think what has to happen is the Board of Regents has to act as what it is. They are the governing fiduciary authority for the Smithsonian Institution. They made that very clear in the statement they issued a month or several weeks ago in response to Trump's effort to himself fire a director of one of the Smithsonian museums. And that laid out 3 points, which I think were extremely important. And the Board of Regents said at the time, they were the governors, if you will, from a fiduciary and governmental standpoint, governing standpoint, policy standpoint of the Smithsonian Institution. And the person who held the authority to do what the president attempted to do, they didn't say this, they stated it positively, was the secretary of the Smithsonian, not the president of the United States. They need to adhere to that position, and they need to stare right back and say exactly what they said then during this round of interventions on the part of the administration.
And do you feel that legally, I mean, after this is all adjudicated, even though the damage will largely be done, when it's finally adjudicated, that the courts will also agree that that Donald Trump did not have the authority to do this?
Oh, I can speak both as a museum director and a lawyer, and I will tell you that at its incipiency, he did not have the legal authority to do what he attempted to do. The Smithsonian Institution is not the Kennedy Center. It is not run in the same way. It does not have the same legal governing structure as the Kennedy Center does. And he did not have the authority to do that. And the regents basically said that to him. But it is a case where, and we've seen this play before, where if that doesn't work, it doesn't matter that he doesn't have the legal authority. The politics will still be the same, but there's a difference between the legal authority and the politics of it. And the failure for them has been on the legal authority side. He doesn't have that authority, in my own estimation. And so that does not prevent, though, the attempt to do politically what he could not really do legally. And that's what we're contending with now.
So we find ourselves in the echo of the Indian Removal Act and the Trail of Tears, and where the Supreme Court said you can't do this, and Jackson said, yes, I can, and I will. And
But you know what the real answer to that is, Wayne? We're still here. We're still here, and we're not going anywhere. And that's what I think so you have to you have to appreciate the immediacy of the situation and what you need to do right now, and we should do that. But I also want us, in reflecting on some of the notes which you had sent me about what we might be talking about, one of the statements, and I may be not paraphrasing the words precisely, but um, there were words by Martin Luther King Jr. where he said, the long arc of history bends toward justice. And I believe that. And after the last 500 years, you don't need to tell somebody who is native that things can get tough some of the time. But the fact is that even after the Trail of Tears, uh, the Cherokee Nation is actually thriving in both Oklahoma and North Carolina. And I have faith. I have a certain faith in that kind of outcome, even though we're going through times more troublous than any I can remember in my own lifetime politically in this country right now.
Well, is it okay for me to talk about the Cheyenne and the two roads?
Yes, surely. Yeah.
You know, uh, your brother Jim has talked to me extensively about this idea. I think probably because I had stepped onto the Black Road, the road of trouble, slightly before I went to visit him,
Mhm.
and losing the love of my life, and so I really worry that we're reaching this point where maybe you can explain a little bit about the two roads, but we are at a point of maximum danger for not only Native people but everybody.
Yeah. Yes, I think that is that is true, and I don't dispute that. I think that the good red road is threatened specifically because of what is happening more generally, and the red road and the black road are similar in that way, uh, but what it counsels us is to I think of two things. It counsels us to not be sleepy eyed about it and to recognize the threat that we're facing and to attempt to do something about it as best we can, but also to have a certain longer range faith in ultimate outcomes that go beyond the destruction, if you will, of the good red road. Um, and I think I can't presume myself to speak for the Black Road, but our paths have been very similar in that regard. But I do believe that based upon my knowledge of the good red road and having lived my life from my dad and what he had to go through, which is very different from what I had to go through. He made sure of that. He grew up in probably one of the worst periods of time culturally in Native history. Um, but he made it through. My brother and I have made it through, and lots of other Native people have made it through. Um, and we have to have, and I do have some faith in those kinds of outcomes because having dabbled in history before I became a lawyer and a museum director, um, I think I know where ultimate trend lines are going, even in this country and even in the face of this.
So you're optimistic, not that either of us are going to see the end of these hard times, but that we will eventually come to our senses and emerge stronger, brighter, more willing to communicate with one another?
I think so. There's actually a book, the title of which is right out of my head at the moment, but I have it. It's very thick, and it talks about 80-year cycles that countries like the United States go through, and that there is, if you look back even at our own history, you will see those cycles. Um, and it's not at all an attempt on my part to say, oh well, don't worry, it'll all be okay. It may not be okay. And what I want for myself is that I never want my 9-year-old and 6-year-old grandkids to think that I was asleep and not doing anything when all of this went on. But by the same token, I have reason, I think, based upon my own individual history, the history of my community, etc., to know that there is staying power, I think, for us in this country, and that there are times when this country has gone through periods. Well, face it, we fought a civil war. You can't get more conflicted than that. And we survived that and went on, and I think we will go on. I am dismayed beyond words by what is happening right now, but I do have an ultimate faith in other outcomes.
Well, you can't ask for a better way to end this discussion, my friend. You've given me some hope.
Well, I hope so. Because but you are correct to be worried. I am too. Anxiety is not a bad thing in these situations. It's a good stimulant. But I think that we are in need. Actually, a good friend of mine had this observation recently. It was interesting to me. The good friend was somebody who was, at the time, both of us were in graduate school, so it's a while ago, was the co-director of the anti-Vietnam War movement called the mobilization, I think, or the moratorium, and which really became a movement. And it became a movement because it sort of pulled together a number of public interest groups, some of which were not focused on the Vietnam War necessarily, but they were trying to mass resistance, if you will, pull it together. And that's kind of what we need to do now. We need something that is kind of a broad-based grassroots movement of resistance to what's happening at the moment. And we can all do what we can individually, but we need to bind our efforts together in ways that constitute a movement rather than a series of individual actions by people. And I see the elements of that already starting, but I think we need more of that.
And we need to do it faster.
Correct. Time is of the essence.
Yeah.
We need to get going.
Rick West, thank you so much for speaking with me.
Not at all. My pleasure. And I wish you and us the very best.
Thank you, my brother.
Okay. Take care.
This song is dedicated to the people of the world and all its inhabitants. We've got to learn to live together with some understanding and care for each other. go the extra mile and do it with a smile. Said if it's true, tell me why we cannot try. Tell me why, yes, if there is a